Hi there. My name is Ben Watanabe, and I am coming to you live from the Nesson.com office in Watertown, Massachusetts. I'm pleased to be joined today by Ricky Doyle, our Nesson.com Red Sox beat writer, and Jason Mastrodonato. He's the beat writer over at Mass Live. How are you guys today?
I'm doing pretty well. I wish I had an overlay, but you identified me, so I think we're good. I think we're golden.
Uh, yeah, that is Ricky Doyle, folks. Even though his name is not on the screen, that's not the usual Ricky Doyle impersonator that we hire when Ricky goes away on vacation. That's an entirely
I'll
different
do the whole field.
So we're going to try something new today. We're going to actually have a conversation between two of our illustrious guys who are out there at the ballpark throughout this entire season. I think that your guys' medal for making it through that year is probably in the mail, so you should be receiving it within the next couple of weeks. We want to talk about not just what the Red Sox have in store this offseason, but also give everybody out there a chance to submit their questions. So if you're watching us right now, you can go onto Twitter, use the hashtag Sox Hangout, and we'll try to get to your question. We already have a few here that we're going to try to get to. We're going to start with the outfield and the rotation because those are the two areas that I think people have the most questions and there's the most upheaval this offseason. So I guess just let's start out with this crowded outfield. Who's in and who's out with the upcoming moves that are coming from your guys' perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, you already mentioned it. It's a crowded situation right now, so it's pretty much inevitable that somebody's going to have to go. And I think just when you look at the situation now, you're probably looking at a starting outfield of Yoenis Cespedes in left, Rusney Castillo in center, and Mookie Betts in right. But that being said, we learned this year that you can't exactly, rely on a young, unproven guy to, all of a sudden just hit the ground running. I mean, we saw the struggles that Xander Bogaerts went through. Obviously, Jackie Bradley Jr.'s offensive struggles pretty well documented. So, while Mookie Betts was this electric player and Rusney Castillo in 10 games looked pretty legit, I think obviously you're going to have that outfield depth. That being said, they're going to have to move somebody. For me, I think it's Shane Victorino was so good in 2013, but just couldn't stay on the field last year. You could make the case that his value is so low right now that it's not really worth trading him. But I just think that when you look at the situation as a whole, I kind of find it hard to, hard to believe that he'd be willing to accept a bench role. I mean, I don't know about you, Jason, but Victorino strikes me as a guy that he either wants to start or he doesn't want to be around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. I don't know how long he could sit on the bench for.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much trade value he has either, because this is a guy who's going to make $13 million this year, turns 34 in November, and if he hits 280 and steals 20 bases, he'll be one of 11 players aged 34 or older to hit 280 and steal 20 bases since steroid penalties began in 2005. So you're talking about a guy who's probably not going to be as good as he once was. The injuries add up over time. He's had a hard time staying on the field, and the Red Sox can't really count on him. So if he's healthy and he's playing well, you're in great shape. You want Victorino out there every day. If anything at all is wrong with him, then you say, okay, well, now where's Mookie going to play? Can Mookie float around and play somewhere else if Victorino's on the field? And then it depends who else you have. I still think that Cespedes is the most likely to get traded because of his value. He has more value than anybody in that outfield aside from Mookie, and I don't think they want to unload him. So then you think, is Allan Craig going to be able to play every day somewhere in that outfield? Because Castillo's playing center. He's got that 7-year contract, and he looked pretty good in the brief time that we saw. So I still think Cespedes is a guy who could get moved.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a question we had from Jennifer Reeves on Twitter. She asked, will Cespedes be traded, and is Mookie, I guess, untouchable? So, Jason, you're saying that you think Cespedes should be traded. How about you, Ricky? What do you guys? Both of them. I mean, Cespedes and Mookie. What's their trade outlook? I guess what's their trade value?
Yeah, well, I could see Cespedes getting traded definitely for the reasons that you mentioned, Jason. Is the fact that his value is extremely high right now. He's slated to make, I think it's $10.5 million next year. And you look at all these, the fact that they got to pretty much rebuild a rotation from scratch. they're going to need this, all the money they can get. So, Cespedes is a guy, I definitely see him being on the move. It's kind of a weird dynamic when you think of it, though. Like, you go out of your way to make it a point to bring in a guy like Cespedes. When you trade Lester, you want a major league ready guy, and then you bring him in for, you'll limp to the finish line, and then you deal him away in the offseason. It's kind of a strange dynamic when you think of it.
It is strange, but what else is out there when you look in the free agent market this year? I mean, if you're a team looking for an outfielder, what do you have? You have Melky Cabrera, who's been great at times, but is unpredictable and has the biogenesis thing attached to his name. Or do you go after one of the aging guys like Michael Kadire or Torrey Hunter, who come with their own risk? So if I'm a team looking for an outfielder and I see Cespedes might be on the trading block, I'm thinking this is great. This could be a much better option. It's only 1 year that we'd have him for, so we can make a run now. And for a team that has some pitching depth, maybe that there could be a match. I keep looking at the New York Mets, and I think these two teams are perfect trade partners because the Mets have so much pitching, young pitching too, and they really need some bats. I wonder if they could work something out with the Red Sox. I think they, on paper anyways, they're two teams that would work great together in a trade.
Yeah, we haven't really even got into the fact that Cespedes isn't exactly, kind of in the Red Sox mold, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. I mean, it was kind of surprised when they brought him in anyways. They've made such an emphasis on these high on-base guys and whatnot. Then you bring in a guy who, that's not exactly his forte, getting on base as much as he can impact the baseball. So, yeah, I agree that, going into this offseason, you got to take a long look at that, and maybe he's a guy you can move to bring in that pitching. I think Cincinnati's another team that's kind of intriguing with all their stockpile of young starters over there.
Well, now let's move to a guy that we know is going to be at least around for a couple seasons, Rusney Castillo. What were your guys' impressions of him in the first few months of his Red Sox tenure, and what is your expectations going into 2015?
Yeah, as far as expectation goes, I still think it's kind of a crapshoot if you're going to start throwing numbers around and things like that. But, I mean, from what we saw, just the 10 major league games itself, I was very impressed. I thought he kind of, he showed an ability to demonstrate 5 tools out there. So I guess the comparison I kept hearing going into this whole thing was Victorino, which again would go back to then you kind of have a redundant situation there if that's actually the case. And I think that he clearly demonstrated he has some of the same attributes, but I also think he has a lot more power. I was pretty surprised by the amount of power that he had.
Yeah, when he came over here, I was talking to a scout who said he wasn't really a power hitter. That wasn't what he was known for at all. And he put on about 15, 20 pounds of muscle, and suddenly he's whacking the ball out of the park. Now, the one thing you wonder about is with new guys in the league, and like you mentioned with Mookie Betts, with Xander Bogaerts, Will Middlebrook saw it in 2012. This happens all over the place. With new guys who come in the majors, they get pitched by the book. I mean, it's funny. If you look at the pitches by percentage that Rusney Castillo saw this year, it is it's a mirror image of major league average. Exactly the right number of fastballs, sliders, curves. He was pitched by the book, and he did great. And you got to give him credit for that because from Cuba to the Gulf Coast League to AA to AAA to the majors, now he's off to the Arizona Fall League, then he's going to Puerto Rico. This has been a whirlwind for this guy who just arrived in America. And it's impressive what he was able to do. The question is, can he do it as pitchers learn what his strengths and weaknesses are? Can he make those adjustments?
I'm pretty excited to watch this guy on a daily basis, too, because he strikes me as a very aggressive player, I guess. Even just reading the box scores before, seeing him in major league action, it was, him getting caught stealing and things like this. So this is a guy that's going to go out there, and I think you're going to see him, be aggressive, particularly on the bases, which they could have used this season. That was, kind of an underrated flaw in their game this year is the old base runner, which was so pivotal to their success in 2013. So, definitely a dynamic player, I would say, is what you should expect.
So he projects as a center fielder, you guys?
Yeah, from what I've been told, it's he has. I don't want to say Jackie Bradley-esque, but he makes very good reads on the ball, so that. It strikes me as he's going to remain in center. But at the same time, I wasn't exactly impressed by what I saw from Mookie Betts in a corner outfield spot. I thought he was better suited for center field. So I don't know, if potentially there's a flip-flop in the cards, but I think it's going to get to a point where they're just going to say, Castillo's too good in the center. He's probably going to end up staying in.
Unless,
Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Unless he looks like a Victorino, who was a center fielder for a long time and then turned out to be a heck of a right fielder, won a Gold Glove with the Red Sox in 2013. He does have the arm. I mean, we saw some arm strength when he showed it this year, and he makes great jumps, has some speed to kind of catch up and get into center if he needs to. So I think they could use him wherever they want. It really depends what they need, where they see Mookie being best fit, if assuming he's going to be on the team on opening day. But he's a pretty versatile guy so far, it looks like.
Right. I think
it's time to completely kind of give up on Jackie Bradley Jr.?
Well, just on Castillo real quick, I think if you're talking about any other ballpark, you might be talking about him as a center fielder. Because you play in Fenway, where obviously that's right field so spacious, like you said, Jason, this guy could really, use him either one of those spots. But no, to your point, Ben, on Jackie Bradley, it's just looking at the outfield picture right now, it's so hard to, see where exactly he fits into these plans. I just think it's going to get to a point where, while he's no longer going to be the centerpiece of any deal to bring in a pitcher or something like that, I think he still holds value because obviously, because of his defensive skills and the fact that there is still potential there that you're just trying to tap into. I think you could see him maybe dealt in kind of a smaller piece to one of these bigger deals.
Yeah, it's a long road up for Jackie Bradley Jr. right now because he's had a lot of chances and hasn't made the best out of any of them with his bat. And we see how dynamic he is as a center fielder. I made this comment the other day, and I don't think it's crazy to say he might be the best center fielder in the world. I mean, there's nobody better than this guy, and we've only seen him for a year and a half, so it's amazing to think how good he could get defensively. Yeah. And the way the game's changing, where it's so much based on pitching and defense, not as much on offense as it used to be. You wonder if there is a team out there who says, we can really use this guy. Maybe we could change him a little bit with his approach. It seems like that got kind of stuck in the mud, his offensive approach. Really, we didn't see too many changes. He changed his stance at one point in the year, started hitting a little bit better. But for the most part, it seemed like he kept doing the same thing. I know the Red Sox got a little bit frustrated with that. And I think if there's one guy that you say he's going to get traded this winter, I think it's Jackie Bradley Jr. It just makes too much sense. There's no room for him on the roster. And he might have more value to another team who thinks he could play every day.
Yeah, that swing is just so long. And the approach, like you said, it was so conducive to what they were trying to build offensively to the point where, going into this past season, it was reasonable to think he might eventually evolve into a leadoff hitter if, everything works out the way it's supposed to, I guess. And then you see him fail to make these adjustments, still has that long swing. Like you said, it seems like they're getting a little frustrated with this guy. And now it's to the point where, change of scenery might just be the best thing.
So, what's the deal with Allan Craig? I didn't, last year I knew he was not having a career season by any stretch of the imagination, but it wasn't until he got here and the trade went down, he looked at his stats and you saw him, and it was like, man, this guy looks nothing like the player he was the last couple of years. What's the prognosis for him going forward?
Well, he stunk. He stunk.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really like the most basic way to put it. But I think that he's a guy that if I'm the Red Sox, I want to bring him back because I just think there is something in there. And he was, he had that foot issue this year. And if you can get him to have a full healthy offseason, then go into next year and then reevaluate after, the first month or so and see what you got. Because I think that when you're looking long-term, too, Mike Napoli's contract's going to be up after next year, and Allan Craig is on a very reasonable contract if you can produce at a level near what he was in St. Louis. So if you look at the situation as a whole, I just feel like he could be that outfield backup first baseman role, maybe get some production out of him with the full year of health, and then go into 2016 and potentially even just starting first baseman. That's of course best case scenario, but
yeah, you remember Carl Crawford when he came over here, and that was.
Who the hell's that guy?
That was a failed experiment. I mean, but the point being is some guys can play anywhere. Some guys can do it. Some guys can go through adversity. They could do anything. They could play anywhere. Allan Craig came over here. it was pretty clear, I think, that he wasn't happy that he got traded. He stormed out of the Cardinals clubhouse, didn't talk to the media, and just walked out. Everyone said he was pretty upset about it. Just signed a long-term deal with this team. He thought he was going to be there forever. So there are, we forget sometimes these guys are human beings too, and sometimes big life adjustments like that are tough, and they can't handle everything that was going along with it. Now, Craig was already having a horrible year to begin with. Then to come over to a new team that's struggling, leave his team that's going to make a run at the World Series here, it wasn't an easy year for Allan Craig. You look at the track record, you think there's much more in there. And, I remember I covered the 2011 NLDS when Craig was just coming up, and there were guys, people just standing on the field watching him take batting practice saying, wow. When it makes that sound that you only hear every now and then, Yoenis Cespedes has it. Craig had that, and he has that type of swing where he can put some power into it. So I think, Ricky, you make a good point. He's too valuable to give up on, and especially when you look down the road, he could be the team's first baseman in a couple of years.
Yeah, that's going to be a real deflating situation to go from, a World Series contender to just walking into a situation where not only is the team struggling, but your role is pretty undefined, I guess. And, it was kind of their roster down the stretch was very, hard to sort through, and obviously he sees that coming in, and it's just, I'm not going to say that was the reason for his struggles. Like you mentioned, he already was having a terrible year, but it is crazy to think that, all of a sudden you're on cloud nine, and next thing you know, you're playing on a team that's stuck in the basement.
Well, we have, it's funny, we sent out this question on Twitter if people had questions, and I think the first 3 or 4 questions all pertain to the starting rotation. But before we move on to that, we have Nick O'Malley, who asks, who has better seats in the press box, Jason or Ricky? And I think that's really the key question that's got to be asked today.
Not even a debate, Jason. 5 times eating. You got the red carpet.
Yeah, well, we got the Springfield Republican is behind us, and it's a long-standing newspaper, and it's been there for however many years. So we got the front row seat of the Springfield Republican.
From what I understand, I guess Gordon needs is efforting a better seat for Ricky this offseason. So we'll see if Easy comes through there.
Yeah, I'm still sitting in Quincy.
All right, let's get to the starting pitching. Everyone basically has the similar question. We got DJ asks, how will the Sox handle the starting pitching retooling? Will John Lester be pursued seriously? You got Henry, who asks, which pitcher do you think the Sox will go after the most? He says which. I think it's probably which pitcher, is not which pitcher, or through a trade. We have a couple questions like that. What are you guys seeing with the rotation that obviously I think needs to be rebuilt this winter?
Well, I still think that, when you look at the options available, I still think John Lester is pretty appealing, just based on the fact that, he's a known quantity. You have history with this guy. The fact that you can get him without relinquishing any prospects or anything like that, and it just, I don't see them really going after Max Scherzer if they don't come to something with Lester. So I think it's a situation where you're going to look to see maybe them go after a guy like Lester. And if they fail to do that, I think James Shields is also going to be part of the mix. And then you start looking to the trade market and maybe a guy like Cole Hamels. There's all there's a lot of these names that you see tossed around for a reason. But I think, my big thing is going into this, they've got to try and get 2 guys that can slot in at the top of that rotation. If you start the year with, say a John Lester as your number 1 or whatever, I don't think you can then have Clay Buchholz as your number 2 starter, Joe Kelly as your number 3, and then, fill in the blanks. I think you got to go out and get 2 legit guys. One is at least a top flight starter, and then a guy that can slide in as the number 2.
Yeah, if you think about it, they are in the most difficult position you could be in as a team that has to win right now, because you have to fill the hardest needs on a team to fill in today's game. You need a number 1 starter and a number 2 starter. It doesn't get any harder than that. So John Lester still makes a lot of sense. I keep saying maybe 5%, I think, is optimistic for the chance that he comes back because of the way that those negotiations went in the last spring training, and the way that Lester kind of cut them off in the middle of the season. It seemed like he was so frustrated by the Red Sox offer that he just didn't even want to deal with it anymore and said, get out of here. I know the Red Sox wish they would have had a little bit more communication during the season, during that negotiation process. And now it's gonna be tough to rekindle that relationship and get to a point where Lester feels like he's not leaving too much money on the table to come back to a team he really likes. And they're going to have to get one on free agency. You have to think. I mean, they have the money to spend. They got about $52 million to spend, I think. If you look at Alex Spear at WEEI, does some great projections for their payroll. So they're going to have a lot of money to spend. They get one in free agency. And then, like you said, Ricky, you look at the trades, and the Cincinnati Reds make a lot of sense because they need to clear some payroll space. They have over $100 million committed to 10 players next year. Johnny Cueto has an option that's, I believe it's $10 million for next year. He would have won the National League Cy Young if it wasn't for Clayton Kershaw this year. There's a guy who could be your number one pitcher. And I still think Chris Sale from the Chicago White Sox makes a lot of sense. If the White Sox say, listen, we haven't had a winning season in 8 years or whatever it is, we haven't made the playoffs since 2005. We have nothing. I mean, their farm system's considered one of the worst in baseball. And if they need to make a franchise-changing move, how do you do it? You got to unload something. And if they unload Sale, you look at the Red Sox. I mean, they could really put some pieces in there that helps rebuild that Chicago franchise. I don't know if the White Sox are willing to do it, but if they are, I still think that one makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think Lester is the best fit, but I just think that it's going to get to a point where his price is going to get way too high. I mean, I don't say this every year, but it only takes one. And you mean to tell me that there's not a team out there that might be willing to toss, say 7 years, $175 million? You think the Yankees aren't sitting there looking at this saying, maybe we'll go to that extent. And the Red Sox, well, I mean, they've already, they've had these negotiations where they've been reluctant to go into the 6-7 year range. I don't know if all of a sudden they backtrack and say, okay, well now we'll do it. I mean, now we have to do it. I just think that, ultimately he's going to price himself out of that range.
Yeah, it's going to have to be maybe 4 or 5 years at the most. Some kind of, maybe they could build in some kind of safety into the contract like they did with John Lackey, where, well, if he does get hurt, what do we get out of this? Is there a way that we can make it, take some of the risk out of the Red Sox hands, maybe give them a little bit more money, maybe give them that extra year, but take some of the risk out and put that on Lester? I do think if there's a guy you're going to go big on, if there's a guy you're going to commit to in their 30s, it's somebody that you trust, and they trust this guy. He's never been hurt. He does have a lot of innings on him, and we've seen Roy Halladay, CC Sabathia. We know those stories of guys with innings who start to slow down. But if there's a guy that you're going to go in on, it's a guy you trust, and that is Lester.
No, they're obviously going to have a really young rotation if they don't make a major shakeup. But they've got two guys in the rotation who, I guess they're not really old, but they're the old people in this rotation, Joe Kelly and Clay Buchholz. Obviously, very different situations. Kelly coming over in the middle of the season, Buchholz being a long tenured Red Sox coming off a disastrous season. What are you guys looking at when you see those guys who I guess are the old guard on a not very old pitching staff?
It's funny how you preface that with the fact that Joe Kelly isn't exactly old, I guess, because he's not much older than these guys that they were bringing up auditioning for a number 5 starter role. But it's funny because you look at the situation; he was head and shoulders above the rest, ahead of the Ruby De La Rosas and the Brandon Werkmans of the world. But Kelly was a guy I really like what he provided, and when you consider the fact that he gave up another year of Lackey basically, and Kelly, you got him under team control for 4 years. I think that regardless of what Allan Craig gives you, I think that deal's ultimately got to be a good deal for the Red Sox. I don't know if Kelly's going to end up becoming this pitcher that's a guy that can slide in as number 2 or number 3, but I think it's realistic to think he can be a very good number 4, number 5 guy with a ceiling of maybe a number 3. Buchholz, he's kind of you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what going into this year. It's a total toss-up. I thought he showed enough down the stretch this year to think that, enough to be optimistic, I guess. But I wouldn't go into next season thinking if you plug him in as the number 2, you're all of a sudden going to have a bounce-back season because there's too much risk involved there.
Yeah, I mean, you can't count on anything with Buchholz. You don't project for him to be an ace. You don't project for him to have a 6 ERA. You can't count on anything. You can't count on innings totals. You can't count on him to be out there every 5 days. He's unpredictable. So, I mean, knowing how much talent he has, any upside that he gives you is a bonus because you can't bet on that going into your season making projections on that. So that's why they have to go after, like we said, a 1 and a 2. And Kelly, I still think Kelly's capable of being a 2. I mean, he could have a season or two where he puts up a 3 ERA, a little bit over a 3. I mean, you look at that fastball, I didn't even realize until I saw him pitch in Boston this year that this guy's dialing it up, 97, 98, 99.
Yeah.
And
late too.
yeah, and a lot of late movement. I mean, what was weird to me was the command issues he had this year because that wasn't much of an issue in the past. I mean, he was always with St. Louis, 3 walks per 9 guy. He comes over here and suddenly he's walking 5 guys per 9 innings. Something was off there. I wonder if he was trying to be a little too fine. Guys coming over from the National League into the American League East, pitching at Fenway Park, pitching at Yankee Stadium, trying to be a little too careful. So he gets that command a little bit better, has more trust in his stuff. I think Joe Kelly, like you said, Ricky, is going to be a really good pitcher for this team for many years.
And another thing with him, too, is very similar to Allan Craig in the fact that, he's landed in a new environment, also had injury issues. So, just kind of getting your feet under you, I guess, and coming in going into next season, I could totally see him having a very good season.
And you watch them in the clubhouse. I mean, Joe Kelly fit right in. It was almost like Napoli last year where he was kind of leading the discussion, making jokes. Guys are coming up to him, asking him questions. He's only 26 years old, but he's been in the league for 3 years now. This will be his 4th year next year. Guys seem to really like him. I think he's looking like a great fit for the club.
Yeah, and I think there's a benefit too to having a guy not much older than these young starters that are kind of trying to groom along, but who has a substantially larger major league track record. I think that they can kind of relate to him in the sense that they're all kind of in the same age bracket, but also the fact that this guy's been around the block, he's pitched on the big stage, yada yada yada. So, I think there's some ancillary benefit to that as well.
Who are some of those young guys? I mean, obviously, Henry Owens is left-handed Steve Nebraska. We all know that. But who are maybe some other young guys who might make an impact for the rotation next season?
Well, I think down the stretch they were really. I don't think they're expecting these guys to come in I don't think they're expecting to look at Ruby De La Rosa, Brandon Workman, Anthony Renato, Alan Webster. For any one of those guys to be a world beater, and all of a sudden you can pencil them in near the top to middle of your rotation. But I think what their hope was that you would see at least 1, maybe 2 of these guys show enough to say, okay, we can feel good going into next season with them as our number 4 or number 5 starter. And that just simply didn't happen. I mean, none of them really stood out. I guess Ruby De La Rosa was the guy to me that probably showed the most promise, but at the same time, when you look at him as a whole, just his arsenal and the pitches that he throws, just strikes me as a guy that might end up in the back end of the bullpen. So it's kind of when they're probably going to fill out their rotation with one of those guys, but it could come down to a competition in spring training, which is another difficult thing because spring training results, we know those aren't exactly reliable. Looking at you, Jackie Bradley Jr. But,
yeah. I think that when you look at Ruby De La Rosa, I mean, he came up his first start this year and was so good. I mean, 7 innings, 8 strikeouts, no walks, 4 hits. It was Pedro-esque, and that's what everyone kept saying. And it's unfortunate to see how inconsistent he was and the fact that the league caught on so quickly to his fastball and changeup mix. And then what else does he really have? So you wonder if he is better suited for the bullpen, and he could be a lights-out guy back there if he's willing to move. Now, we've seen this in the past where a lot of these guys say, I'm not even interested. They resist. We saw it with Felix Doubront. So I just want to be a starter. And Doubront could be electric out of the bullpen. He wants to be a starter. He's going to try to work that out with the Chicago Cubs now. So if De La Rosa is willing to move, he's tired at the end of this season. There's no question. He only pitched 150 innings, I think, between the minors and the majors. I don't know if he's going to last as a starter, so that makes a lot of sense. And then the other one is Brandon Workman. He's an aggressive strike thrower, which is great, but he really doesn't project as anything more than a number 4, number 5 starter. He could really do some damage out of that bullpen, go multiple innings for him, come out with the fastball and just gun it for an inning or two. So I think those two guys make sense in the bullpen, and I'm with, I still think Alan Webster is a guy that could really be a decent starter in the major leagues as he gains more confidence.
Yeah, I'm with you on those two guys, Werkman and De La Rosa in the bullpen. I mean, especially with Werkman when you saw the dip in velocity. I mean, obviously his stuff's going to play up a little bit in the bullpen. And also, you got to look at this too. Say the Red Sox do re-sign Koji, bring him back as a closer. There's a chance that, one, he could go through a rough patch similar to what he went through this year, and two, that he's only back for one more year, and then you suddenly have this long-term problem on your hands after 2015 as to who's going to be the closer after in the post-Koji era. And I think you look at De La Rosa and even Werkman as two guys that could potentially fill a ninth-inning role. I mean, I think they have the stuff, they have kind of the demeanor to fill in that role. So I think that they'd be better served to start off the year with those guys in the back end of your bullpen, kind of groom along in that late inning role, see what you got there, and then potentially in 2016 you have one of those guys closing out games for you.
All right, I don't want to take up your guys' entire day. We did start a little late, so I was allowing us to run a little bit longer. I guess I'll just give you both a chance to give us like a final thought, either on the outfield or on the rotation. Heading into, we're definitely going to do this again. We'll hit all the other positions on the field, bullpen, third base coach, anything you want to hit. But just for right now, I'll give you both a chance to just give a final thought for today.
Well, one, we got to get this overlay situation squared away so that much more recognizable to the American public. but one situation we didn't touch on, which I'm sure we will, like you said, it's a long off season and there's plenty to sort through, is the whole situation at third base, because that to me is, it's, I guess in terms of the pecking order of what it's kind of the top conversation right now, I guess it would go outfield and rotation, and then third base is an area they've really got to address, because I don't think you can trust Will Middlebrooks going into next year just starting third baseman. Which brings up the point, should you look externally? And there's obviously some options there with Pablo Sandoval, Chase Headley, etc. So I'm sure we'll dive into that at some point. You should have sent those questions along, but yeah, that's an area that I think if you have a deep roster and you can kind of survive having a weakness or a question mark at one position, but I think there's too much unpredictability in other areas. You consider Christian Vasquez; he's so good defensively. What's he going to give you offensively? And Rusney Castillo, he's also kind of an unproven guy. So I think that right now there's just a lot of question marks as to what you're going to get for next year. And ultimately, I guess you got to build a roster in which you're kind of mitigating all these risks, and it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, I'll leave you guys with this. How awesome is it that Jake Peavy just went over to San Francisco and has been incredible? I mean, goes his whole career without really having a chance to do anything in the postseason. He comes over to Boston last year, isn't great in the postseason, but he wins a World Series. Then he goes over to San Francisco this year, and he's got a chance to win another one at age 33. A 2.17 ERA for them in the regular season. Really cool to see a guy who's been through so much with injuries to bounce back and perform as well as he has. And it's nice to see when a trade works out for both sides. The Red Sox got a couple of good young arms for him. And now the Giants might win a World Series with him.
There's some guys that are easy to pull for. I mean, you two are two of them, and then Jake Peavy, obviously, he's a third I'll throw in there. So definitely jump on board at that.
Great, excellent. Hey, thanks a lot for Jason Mastrodonato from Mass Live, and for Ricky Doyle from NESN.com. My name is Ben Watanabe. I hope you enjoyed the Sox Hangout, and hit us back next time we do one, which will be sooner rather than later. I think that this was pretty fun.